Okay, in this video module here, what we're going to be doing is talking about the user interface of DoomEdit. Now, let's go and get one thing straight. We're not going to be covering every single menu option, button, feature, thingy-majig, everything that the user interface allows the user to do, for the simple fact that it would, A, take forever, B, once we were done, you would then know all of DoomEdit and how to create levels because, well, we covered every feature and how to use them. So there would be no reason for any other videos. And finally, C, the file size would be so huge, even people with broadband would take forever to download the video. Not to mention, you would probably go to sleep before it was over because it would probably last for days. Does that sound pretty accurate?
I mean, you don't want entry 273-5 on your notes, the fifth lighting option.
Exactly. So the idea of this lesson is just to give a quick overview of the user interface, just so that those that are new to working with DoomEdit, when they first open it up, they'll get a general idea of where everything is at. So keep that in mind. Now, don't worry. As we dive deeper and deeper into level design for Doom 3, everybody's going to become more and more familiar with all of the options that are available because as they come up, as we need them, we will then discuss them, talk about all the features, options, etc., and put them to good use. So with that, let's go ahead and give a quick overview of the user interface. Starting out at the top, we have what almost every single Windows application has, and that is a main menu bar. And the main menu bar gives you all sorts of functionality. For the most part, most of the functionality that you're going to find within that particular application, in this case, DoomEdit. You know, we start all the way over here on the left-hand side, and we have File. Well, gee, we can open files, we can save files, we can create new files. And, you know, when you're talking about DoomEdit, the files that we're talking about, what are those, Logan?
Well, what we're actually editing are going to be map files.
They're maps. They're your levels that you're going to run around in, of course. So, I mean, it only makes sense. And, of course, way down here, we've got our most recent files that we've opened, or most recent maps. I mean, that's, again, everybody has seen this over and over. So, from there, moving on over, edit. You know, we're not going to talk about all these menu options. We'll just talk about a couple of them. But edit, you know, come on. We have the ability to undo and redo things that we've done, copy, paste, delete, get map information, get entity information about a specific entity that's selected. We'll talk more about those later. And then there's just other things, and also preferences as well. And then moving on from there, Logan, you're being awfully quiet. Talk about a couple of these things.
Well, under View, this simply allows us to control how certain viewports react and what they show you, what information they show, including switching between orthogonal views and in your camera view, exactly how that camera view displays. Are you going to look at it as an editor mode where you have special coloring for a different type of object, or more of a real, true rendered mode where you see what it's going to look like in game?
Exactly, and these are going to be things, of course, we'll be talking about as we go deeper and deeper, as I've already said. And moving over, you know, things on selection, BSP. BSP is a big one. I mean, we're going to be rebuilding it, right?
I mean, that's where we're going to go when we want to actually build the BSP and make the level playable.
Exactly. Then another really big one, of course, is the grid. You know, you just don't want to turn a grid off when you're developing for a first-person shooter. I don't care what game it is. You should always have the grid on. You have the ability to really, really go to a fine grid. I mean, come on, 0.125. That's pretty darn fine. So there's no reason to turn snap to grid off. I mean, you really want to keep that on. And we have the ability to jump to all these different grid settings here, so very useful. And materials, Logan, you want to talk about materials?
Well, materials, once you get into texturing your level, this can become very useful, as you may want to get a very broad view of what all textures you have available. Or you might want to look at just a few that you've been using recently.
Exactly. Plus, it also gives you quick access to the Surface Inspector, which is something we'll be discussing a little bit later. And then miscellaneous, region, brush, and brush is another big one. One of the things that you're going to find quickly when we start working with designing real quick levels, you know, like a basic room, is that you can click and drag out a brush over in your orthogonal views, which we'll talk about those in just a minute. And, of course, by default, you're going to be dragging out what? A cube, right?
Right.
And you may want to change the type of brush that's drug out. And, well, you can come up into brush, and here you go. You have all sorts of different options that you can choose from. And then, Logan, patch?
Well, patch would contain a bunch of options when editing curved surfaces.
Exactly. And then moving on over, plugins, help. Up under help, here's a good one, the command list. So if you want to know the hotkey for how to do one of a million different things, this is the place to go. And once you become familiar with all the hotkeys, use them. It makes you a lot faster. So anyways, this is just a great place to go to see all of the different hotkeys that have been mapped to specific operations. Okay, so moving on from the main menu bar, we step down up underneath that and we get into the toolbar. And the toolbar, of course, provides access to a lot of functionality that's found in other places, but gives you, the ability to quickly just click on an icon and boom, there you go. And we start out with some general things such as the ability to open and save the map that we're working on. And then from there, you'll find that a lot of the functionality has been grouped together, so icons that are related to one another have been kind of grouped with a little bit of spacing off to the side. We're not going to cover all these, but Logan, you want to give us a quick run across the top and just talk about some of them?
Well, in the second group over, we have simple mirroring and rotation, which allows you to mirror over any of the 3 axes or rotate in 90-degree increments on those axes.
Yeah, this is just, taking a selected brush and flip it or rotate it or something like that. And of course, that becomes very handy.
So the next group down from that is a set of selection techniques, where you can take existing brushes and use those to define exactly what other brushes are selected. So if you have a group of things that you want to be able to grab quickly but not hold control and go through every single one, this will allow you to set up more complex selection scenarios.
So think of it like this. In a lot of applications, we have the ability to do a marquee select, right? You click, drag, and out comes the old fence dashed line type thing, and then everything within it gets selected. Think of it like that, but a lot more complex, or at least giving you a lot more complex functionality, so we can select things. Well, actually, let me not get into it. It's just advanced selection methods. Haha, there we go. We'll talk about them a little bit later.
So down from that now we have our CSG operations.
CSG. Interesting. Yes, that's a very fancy sounding word, Logan.
Well, CSG of course stands for Computed Solid Geometry. This takes into account brushes that may be intersecting each other and how they react to that. Taking a single brush and then, based on the fact that it is seen as a solid object, use it to either define an area of another brush, maybe cut out of another brush, maybe take something that is a full solid object and hollow it out by turning it into lots of other brushes.
Sounds like something we may be using quite often when we start designing our levels.
Oh, yes.
So in other words, some of our tools, like a skill saw and a hammer and things like that.
Right, of course. And included in this group is the clipper, which would basically be the saw, if you will.
That's the chainsaw, if you will. Clipper, we keep talking about these brushes, and that's our basic geometry element, if you will, inside the level. And we use these brushes for defining. You just think of it like a wall, a floor, things like that. And when Logan talks about the clipper over here, clipper's a good one. Clipper's like a saw that we can specify. We're going to clip a brush from point A to point B, and actually we can throw point C in as well. And we basically just shave a brush off. So think of taking a chainsaw to your wall and slicing down it, and you're now clipping your wall. But don't really do that at home. You get the idea. Okay, so moving right along.
Well, in the next group we have some buttons that allow us to interact with viewports, change the viewport, and a lot of these have shortcuts associated with them as well. But I mean, if you need the button, there it is. Again,
and we'll be talking about that a little bit more in depth just a little later.
Down in the next group, basically by itself, is the free rotation tool. This is very nice because it allows you to interact with an object to rotate it,
right,
and you're not constrained to the 90-degree rotation of some of the simple rotation buttons. The next group down is a set of scale constraint tools.
When we start scaling, or you could think making larger, stretching an item out, the ability to constrain it in a particular axis.
That's right. And another button in its own group is move only, so that you don't accidentally scale anything. All you can do is move brushes or objects. In the next group is a set of display options for various objects in your map, so that, say for example, if too many models are making the viewport slow, you could instead display those models as bounding boxes instead.
Okay.
And down from there, the next two groups are for editing curves and splines.
That's right. Now let's go ahead and point something out. For those of you guys that are running DoomEdit in a higher resolution than we are, of course you know already that there are some icons over here off the screen that you should be able to see, and at the moment looking at this video you guys cannot. And the reason is, well, because of all of the computing power that's required and the size of files that are created at high resolution, the movie files, we're just trying to keep everything as efficient as possible. So a couple of the buttons have been shaved off. Not to worry, when we start talking a little bit later on about the functionality requiring those buttons, then we'll make them visible. Those files are just going to be a little bit larger because we'll have to go to a higher resolution or manipulate our view around a little bit of the user interface. But don't worry, we'll get to those later, so no worries that they're cut off. And finally, at the very end, which you can't see at the moment, is the Show Doom button, which you could just hit F2 on your keyboard to bring it up as well. Okay, so from there, that's just a real quick look at the toolbar, basic functionality, things that you're going to be using a lot in level design. And from there, we step down into all of this area right here. And so you can think of it as kind of divided up into 1, 2, 3, 4 key areas at this point. The first one up here in the upper left is very important. It's titled Cam up here. It's a camera view. This is the view through our camera, which if you look right over here, there's our camera right there, and we can see that the direction that we're viewing out of the camera. So what the camera sees is being presented right here in a perspective view with textures and some lighting effects, etc. And Logan, you want to talk a little more about that?
Well, the camera view is your 3D look into your level as you're building it. Very useful for seeing exactly how everything looks, seeing or just getting a broader view. Also, certain types of objects will be colored differently, as you can see by various models that are shaded in blue depending on what type of model it is. As well as a very important thing is that it gives you a textured view. So you're going to be using the camera mode a lot when you're texturing your level.
Right, so you can see how your textures are aligned and things like that. So anyway, this is a very, very important view. And moving on from it, well, also we can go ahead and mention one more thing. And since this is tied directly into the game, we are able to see through that camera the way that the level will truly be rendered by the game.
Right, we can switch this from an editor-style view over to more of a game-rendered view. So we can see exactly how lighting is playing into everything, see the effects of bump maps and normal maps, and just get a better preview.
Exactly, and that's very cool. Now, right now, we've got one of id's levels loaded, so we really don't want to do that for the simple fact that with everything going on right now, it's really going to suck the resources out of the computer and slow things down tremendously. But when we get over into making some very simple rooms, we will show you how to do that and show you the benefits from using that particular view. So moving on over to the right, this window right here, our viewport, if you will, this is an orthogonal viewport, meaning that this is where we're going to see a 2D representation from specific angles, specifically a top view, a front view, and a side view. And it's very important. You could kind of think of this like blueprints, okay? So with this being a top view of the blueprints, and we can see how things are constructed. And I mean, if we come in here and we were to go ahead and zoom out, Logan, and you can see as we zoom out, we're able to see we've got a grid over the entire viewport, which, as I said earlier, you want to leave grid snapping on at all times. But, having the ability to come in here, zoom in and out is very important, and we can see this is just the top view, the construction of what the level looks like. But then, Logan, if you want to real quick, go ahead and switch over to another view. So he used Control-Tab, and he just switched over to a front view. And, of course, now the front view is going to allow us to represent a height. And we can also switch over to, if you switch one more time, here's a side view. So with these three different viewports quickly at hand, we can see just about any angle from a non-objective type view with the orthogonal view. Of your level at that particular time. So with this, we don't have any perspective distortion to worry about, but that's why we've got our cam view over here. We can always position the camera where we're looking at, something specific that we're working on over here, and then we get to see a view, if you will, in 3D of what it looks like in your cam view. So this becomes really important. Go ahead and toggle that back over to top view. Okay, fantastic. All right, so alongside of our orthogonal views, we've got our z-axis viewport right here, and this is kind of like a height indicator, and it also allows you, of course, to move things as well.
Right. It's kind of a shorthand viewport where you don't have. It's a viewport with only one dimension.
Right.
Only z-axis, which is why you don't see grid squares. You simply see grid lines, since we're only dealing with values in z. And the reason we have this is so that we have basically the last axis we would need to fully edit everything from a top view. In top view, you edit in X and Y. Those are the only two values you can move or scale any object in. But with the Z view, a smaller view controlling just height, that means that without switching your main orthogonal view, you can actually position, size, scale, and align anything in all three axes. And you don't have to dedicate a massive amount of space to this window. It can be just a very fine, really all that you need is a line in Z, which is why it's so narrow.
Right. Okay, so the z-axis, very useful. Moving on over to the left from there, now what we do is we get into what is known as the inspectors, and this is what's going to allow us access to, most of the things that we're going to be doing outside of brushes in our level. I mean, when we start talking about, we add entities. Just about everything's an entity, right? We put a player start in there, we have a light in there, that's an entity. and we need to take the entity and we need to manipulate specific parameters of that entity or properties. And with that, we can come over here to the Entity Inspector. And from here, Logan, if you want to go ahead and make that a little bit larger so you can see a little bit more of what's going on. So he's just going to go ahead and move that up a little bit. So check it out. We can see the class name, the origin. We've got all these different properties that we can come in here and set for different things that are selected. Of course, with a light, there's another place where you're going to be working with lights as well.
Right, there's an additional, almost its own dedicated window for specific lighting properties, though you'll still use the General Entity tab for simple stuff like when you need to turn a light on and off.
Right. So basically what we'll be doing is, think of this area right here as kind of like a properties window for whatever entity is currently selected. Okay? And moving on over, we get into the Media tab, and the Media tab is going to show us all of the assets available for use within a level. Okay, kind of think of it as a repository of assets. There you go. Everything from textures, materials, we have sounds, we've got particles, models. If you need it, this is where you're going to be able to go hunt for it and find it for adding it into the game. Okay, and then of course over here with textures. So now we can see all of the textures that are available. Now this specific tab does two types of textures that it's going to show.
Right, well exactly what textures are shown are either
in use in the level.
In use in the level, or all of them that are currently loaded in memory.
Right.
And you can switch back and forth between those under the materials category, where you can go back and forth between in use or show all.
Right. Okay. And then from there we've got the console. Well, guess what? This is the console from Doom 3. This is your game console. Remember, when you're in the editor, the game is running. It is loaded. So it's the same thing. We've got the console here. We can see everything that's been echoed out to the console, and we can come down here and issue commands as well. And we'll start taking advantage of that a little bit later on in the video lessons. And finally, we've got groups. For those of you Radiant users out there, you know that groups has really been an underdeveloped tab for a long time. And right now, we haven't spent any time with it ourselves. I'm not sure how far the functionality has been pushed. So this time, we're just simply not going to worry about it. So let's just go ahead and take this guy right here and just move him back down a little bit. Now down across the bottom, most applications in Windows nowadays have a status bar. Well, DoomEdit is no exception. It does as well. And it just provides some basic data. Logan, you want to talk about some of the things that it displays?
Well, it'll show the current coordinate of wherever you're hovering the mouse. It'll also show totals of how many brushes and entities in the level. And all the way on the right, it'll give you some information about, like, for example, what your current grid setting is.
Exactly. So, again, the idea of this video was just to provide a quick overview for the Radiant or DoomEdit interface, and that's what we've done. We've talked about 6 key areas: the main menu bar, the toolbar, the camera view, the orthogonal viewports, the Z-axis viewport, and the inspectors. Well, I guess we could say 7. We did talk quickly about the status bar at the bottom. And as I said at the beginning of this video, we will use more and more of the features available in DoomEdit as we progress deeper and deeper into level design for Doom 3. So that's going to wrap up this video.